Well, thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of The View from the Pew. My guest today is Hank Brown. Hank is probably well known to most of you who are watching this. Hank has served multiple times as an elder here at Oak Hills and is currently our building and grounds elder, which this past year has meant a whole lot of work of various kinds. And I'm particularly grateful to you, Hank, because all of the technological adjustments that we've had to make this year have really been kind of on your plate, and I know Tom Heimberger, and we have been able, thanks to your efforts, to kind of keep up with what COVID has required in terms of online ministry and sound and audio and all of those pieces. So Hank's been a key player behind the scenes this year. I'm very grateful to you for that. So thanks for joining.
It has been a pleasure, honestly, and to watch where we started back in March when all this started up. And what has transpired. We kind of hit the ground running a little bit with the sound system prior to COVID. But one of my passions has been, we've got video now, we've got live streaming, and that's been a passion that I've had on a back burner for a number of years. And to see that come together now, and to, obviously you all know that I've got a mother-in-law that lives with us, Martha, who's 95, and so we're very cautious about getting out. So it's been a little challenging to do some of this, but we enjoy the streaming, and I've come to have a greater appreciation for the elder. I'm 71, so I am an elder, but the seniors. I'm having a better understanding of what that means and how we can have an outreach to them. And I see this system as reaching out and giving people the ability to, whether on vacation or whether they are in a nursing home someplace, they can connect up with this church in this fashion. And that's a joy. I mean, it really is. I'm excited about it. Truly, I'm excited about it.
Wow, awesome. Let me ask you, Hank, on that note, I know we've all experienced the past year and the pandemic in slightly different ways. And I'm curious, just as you reflect on what this journey has been like for you and your family, what's been hard about COVID? And then the flip side, have there been some silver linings, maybe some new lessons and insights and experiences that you would say, hey, I could see God's presence even in this time?
When we started in our youngest son, Jonathan, we've got a granddaughter that lives up here in this area, and we were babysitting twice a week.
Wow.
And that has been the hardest for me and for Valerie. It has been the hardest thing not to be able to hug that sweetie. And to go over, I have access, I see her, but she was falling asleep on my chest at nap time. And so to not have that contact, it's tough. It is tough. That's been the hardest. In the beginning, we were panicked about buying food. We're kind of going back to that mode again of having food delivered. Because the newest virus that's out here right now, the mutation is a little more deadly, and you can be infected faster. But, we've been blessed. I look at, and, I don't want to get ahead of it with the sermon that you gave, but, Valerie and I have been on a long path. And I'm an emotional person, so I don't want to get too emotional.
That's totally accepted.
But it was buying a house in 5 hours. We did that at the end of December is when we closed. And from December till mid-March when we moved in, we put in a lift. We put in hardwood floors on the first floor and in her master bedroom downstairs, so she had mobility. And we had to get all that together, and at the same time, get everything moved out of the old house. We still have stuff in our old house. And to make that transition, it is, my mother taught me a long time ago, and you've heard the phrase out of me, and a lot of people have. It's a day at a time, and faith in the man upstairs. That is, that and the golden rule. That kind of sums up my faith. Right? It really, truly does. And growing up as a kid, we just had, my father had mental illness, so we lived with mental illness in our family, and that is challenging. And so we had that experience, but this last year, I've seen so many great things, the compassion of people, the outreach that people do. to others, you know, we've had a nasty time, and we've had them and us's. We've had that environment for a long time.
Yeah.
And so when COVID hit, it really amplified that even more.
Sure.
But you've seen the quality of humanity.
Yeah.
And it's in little things. I mean, I watch, it just in little things.
Yep.
Whether you're going to the grocery store and comments from people. And,
Sure.
you know, whenever I see anybody in a grocery store, my comment always is at the end, stay safe.
Yeah.
Stay safe. Do your best to stay safe so that in a year or 6 months,
Right.
you can re-engage with your family and do whatever you've got to do. And it's hard.
We
It
can
is
just
hard.
hang in there.
It's hanging in, and hanging in is tough.
Yeah.
Hanging in is exhausting.
Well, and that's where I love that wonderful phrase that your mom taught you, day at a time, and faith in the man upstairs. In an interesting way, Hank, if you read these last chapters of the Sermon on the Mount, that's it in a nutshell.
That's it.
Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow.
Yep.
Tomorrow has enough worry of its own, so there's day at a time.
Yep.
And he says, ask, seek, and knock.
Yes.
And you will receive. The door
Yes.
will be opened.
Yes.
So there's faith in the man upstairs. And so I think that's, you know, it sounds so simple, but to live that way day by day.
We are so programmed to have control.
right.
Control.
Yep.
You were sharing stories of the Vietnam story, and you shared the one of the person that wanted to take the train ride. You know, Valerie goes, you don't worry about anything. That's the comment she makes to me. You don't worry about anything. And
Does she mean that in a kind way or in a frustrated way?
You know, it was not trying to understand it.
Yeah.
Because Valerie and I are 180 out.
Yep.
But we're coming up on 48 years of marriage.
Hey, there you go.
And she's my best friend.
Something's working. Yep.
Something's working. But that has been something that, you know, my mother just because of, it really goes back to my father and mental illness. When you're dealing with mental illness, you never know what's going to happen next.
Wow.
You don't know where that person's going to be mentally and emotionally. And so it's a roller coaster ride all the time.
Wow.
And so my mother, to keep the family together,
Yeah.
that was her mantra.
Wow.
And that's what kept our family together.
Yeah.
And so with Valerie, I mean, I bounced a little bit. I'm ADHD. I don't apologize for that. But it was, you know, Valerie and I have had times in our life. I mean, we had cancer before we got married, and Valerie was going to have a hysterectomy, wasn't going to have any kids.
Wow.
Said, is that important to me? I said, I kind of lied to myself. No, it's not.
Wow.
But the reality was, you know, we got married, and about 2 years into our marriage, cancer came back.
Wow.
And so we had Christopher, and that was a very sketchy pregnancy, and then we had 3 miscarriages, and then we had Jonathan.
Wow.
And so through all of those experiences, it always goes back to, you know, the man has been there all the time with our life.
Yeah.
We have had times where things were financially tight, and, you know, we're trying to figure out how we're going to have a house payment.
Yeah.
And we get a note in the mail from the bank that says we've had an overpayment.
Wow.
And it was within dollars of our house payment.
Gosh.
And I've seen example after example after example of that in our life.
Yeah.
And so it is blind faith.
Yeah.
You know, everybody wants to be dialed in and have everything in control.
Yeah.
And the reality is you really don't have anything in control except your faith.
Sure.
That's an action you can take and do.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's blind faith. It is, the Lord will take care of me.
Yep.
And our family.
Yep.
And he's going to put us through trials.
Yep.
My worst day of my life was I got drafted.
Ah.
And I was at the end of the Vietnam War. The war was still going on. I was one of the last draftees in the state of Virginia.
Wow.
It was the end of my life in my mind.
Yeah.
Because I had friends that were on the wall. I knew people that died in Vietnam. And so it is the worst day of my life, supposedly in my mind. But I get an assignment out on the West Coast, and I meet my wife. And it's love at first sight.
Yeah.
And she is, you know, she's still the love of my life.
Yeah.
And it is so many things that happened in my life in that experience.
Yeah.
Greg Lund coming to this church.
Yeah.
And he had a tape, and I've told the story to a lot of people, but we had, Valerie and I were trying to decide of a church where to go. And we had already tried a number of churches around here, and we drove up this hill to this church. And Bruce was the pastor at that time, interim pastor, and there was cassettes out in the back in the old sanctuary, and it was of the new minister coming, Greg Lund.
Yeah.
And Valerie and I listened to that, and his story was about we need to share our miracle experiences in life.
Yeah.
And we need to share them with each other because it strengthens our faith.
Yeah.
And his story was about a car and a part that failed, and he was out in the middle of nowhere on vacation. And he walked down to a farmhouse, and that farmhouse, that guy was into Volvos. And he had the part to fix Greg and Kirsty's and their car to get them going.
Sure.
And we joined the church at the same time they did, and we're still very close friends.
Yeah.
And it was that, a chest. We all have a chest of experiences and faith experiences that you can't explain.
Right.
But we know where that is coming from.
Yep.
And to be able to sit there and share that and share those experiences.
Sure.
You know, we're still on the path. I have no idea what tomorrow brings.
Who knows?
I don't.
If this year's taught us anything, it's that we don't know where we're headed.
You have strong faith.
I love what you're saying, Hank, that you can look at those things and you can say, well, coincidence? But if you know enough people who have enough of those stories and you start to put together, I mean, just for me to hear, I didn't know that story about you thinking this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. And what came out of it? Your 48-year marriage, right?
My marriage.
Yeah. Your children.
2 children, 3 grandchildren.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Martha and I, Mom and I have known each other for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And one of the blessings out of COVID is that we were able to get her into our place the middle of March, end of March, March 20th. And she was in rehab. And we got her out of rehab and into the house. And within 2 weeks, everything was locked down.
Gosh.
And under this house, we have become a family.
Yeah.
And we are a tight family now. And that wasn't the case. It wasn't the case. It was that she was living on her own, and we were living on our existence. And the two of us, two groups, were trying to work with each other, coming under one roof. The biggest challenge as a son-in-law is to say, gee, I want my mother-in-law to come live with us. I mean, most son-in-laws would go, no, thank you, I don't want that.
Right.
But with us, it has been a wonderful time. And it's been a growth, an enriched growth.
Yeah.
And every Sunday we sit down there and we watch our church here.
Yep.
And then we switch over to St. Luke's in Lexington, Kentucky, and watch Lexington's church service.
Wow, it's awesome.
And Mom likes to watch the Gaithers, so we sit down and watch the Gaithers.
You got your Sunday worship dialed in.
I mean, it is. It's uplifting. I mean, really, you share meals together, and it's just this has been a wonderful growth in the middle of sadness and tragedy, and 400,000 plus people mourning the loss of loved ones.
Yeah. No. But I bet every one of those families around the nation could have a similar conversation.
Oh, I'm sure.
Where there have been those God sightings, we call them, at Vacation Bible
absolutely.
School. And I think about last year, how quickly you guys came into that house.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was blown away. It was a 24-hour process, and that was a done deal. And at the time, I remember thinking,
5 hours.
I hope that was good.
Yes.
Little did we know, right?
No.
Within a matter of months, the world was going to be shut down. And if you hadn't had Martha come into the house at that time...
I don't know if Martha would be here.
I agree.
I don't know if Martha would be here. We have been able...
amazing.
I don't want to share too much of private things because Mom's going to watch this also.
Yeah.
But it was, she came in, she had some weight she needed to lose.
Sure.
She came in with oxygen, had bottled oxygen, and swollen ankles.
Yeah.
And Mom, her oxygen she's off oxygen. Yeah. She tracks at 95. We have a ritual every day, about 3 times a day, of taking oxygen and temperatures. And she's in the 95 to 97. Sometimes she hits 99. And this is a woman that should not be doing this.
That is amazing.
And it's the family. I mean, it's strong faith in the family, and we all love each other. So that's good medicine.
That's right.
That is really good medicine.
It really is. One thing I appreciate about you, Hank, and the way that you have helped me and maybe pushed me personally, which I'm grateful for.
I love you, Jeremy.
I love you too, man. So, as Valerie has pointed out, you're not a guy who worries. You tend to see the glass half full. Mm-hmm. And I think, to put it in maybe more biblical terms, you're willing to live by faith sometimes in a way that those of us who are wired to be more cautious are sometimes reluctant to take a step of faith. But what I see in Scripture, what I think Jesus is pointing out, is that when we're willing to live kind of on that bold edge of faith, that's when we get to see Him come through.
Absolutely.
Because He has to. We've left room for Him to work, right? We haven't tried to control. And you've said that even in session meetings. We got to leave room for God here. If we have it all buttoned up ourselves, then that's our operation. We don't want to be our operation. We want to be God's operation.
Absolutely.
And I've appreciated, Hank, your encouragement, and I see it in your life. Even that house, for example. People of a different temperament would have been reluctant to pull the trigger.
Not only does it do that, the house we live in right now, 21 years ago, we were going to build in this community, and the house that we're in right now was our favorite home in that community.
Wow.
And we now live in that home. And it was the fastest thing we've ever done, a 5-hour decision. Going out to pick up a TV stand for the sunroom, for a television there, and to have it turn into a home is beyond belief. It's just been, you know, I sit in the sanctuary, and I think about, you know, I was on the committee, the building committee, to decide what we were going to do and at what expense. And this was a hard decision for a lot of people. There were groups that wanted to be in the black, wanted to make sure that everything was paid for. And this was a big stretch, and we did this at the height of the depression, of the recession. You know, we were one of the few. The only other one was Multnomah Press was building a fellowship hall, and we were starting the construction on this. And here it sits. And the conversations we had at that time was what I said to you and saying session members. You've got to leave room for God. You've got to allow space to see miracles happen. If you're all buttoned down, you're all buttoned down, and you miss the miracles.
That's right. That's
okay?
right.
You miss them. And it's lived by faith. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. I'm not planning out. That drives Valerie crazy some of the time, but I'm not one that plans out that far. I get up in the morning and, you know, and I tell Valerie, because especially with COVID, it is make a plan, but don't beat yourself up if you don't get to the plan or you get to the end of the plan, because there's always tomorrow.
That's right.
There's always tomorrow. And if there isn't tomorrow, you're there.
That's right.
Okay, so
and that's a great point too. Why would we worry, right? I mean,
it's a win-win.
Scripture keeps calling us. Well, Hank, I want to just thank you for what you've done in the past year to serve your church, to serve Christ here. I think, too, about this sanctuary and the times of worship we've had here, the baptisms we've been able to celebrate here, and to know that there was a point in time where it required a leap of faith to make this a reality.
It was a big lift.
That's a lesson, you know. And
it was a big lift.
Hopefully that lesson stays with us as we move into the future in 2021.
That's why I'm excited about the system we now have. I've got another year and a half or so on session. And I will have been the building holder for 6 years at that point in grounds. And I'm not done here yet. I see this as an outreach, and I'm kind of excited about it. And that'd probably be the next area I jump into, is to how, you know, how to carry this out to seniors, nursing homes, those kind of things.
Awesome, cool. Well, like with everything, we'll trust God with that, and we'll see where we go.
Stay at a time.
That's it.
Faith in the man upstairs.
Good words to end on. Hank, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jeremy. Pleasure. Absolutely a pleasure. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful day.